Hello and welcome to SPL Express as we look ahead to match week 10 in the Singapore Premier League. And here to help us do that, we have Rhysh Roshan Rai, former professional player. But before we come to you, let's have a look at what's coming up this weekend. Tampines Rovers and Balestier Khalsa get things going on Friday as the Stags look to continue their unbeaten streak in the league. Saturday sees Marko take charge of his first game as Hougang head coach, and he faces a stern test in the form of champions Albrechts Niigata. Brunei DPMM's clash with Tanjong Pagar has been shifted to Sunday, and it will be played at the Bishan Stadium because DPMM Stadium in Brunei is still under renovation. Meanwhile, we have a very exciting match of the week to look forward to as Galang International welcome the Lion City Sailors. So here's a look at the standings after 9 rounds of football. Albrecht's top of the table, but only just, with a slender 1-point advantage over Tampines Rovers, who have yet to taste defeat this season. The Sailors 4 points off the pace, just ahead of Galang International, who complete the top 4. While in the bottom half, Hougang United, the glaring name there, they're below the Young Lions, but that could change this weekend. So let's start with the match of the week. Galang International up against Lion City Sailors. Roshan, let's talk about Galang, and I want to focus in on them defensively. They lost their goalkeeper Zaiful Nizam. They brought in Amrul Adli as well at the back, but they haven't been great defensively. Just one clean sheet, and it came in their last game against Balestier. How do you think they're going to cope against the Sailors?
You know, I think it's been a bit of a strange season for Galang. There have been some games where they've looked really good and others where they've not quite been at their best, and yet they find themselves in the top 4 heading into match week 10. But defensively, yeah, you mentioned them losing Zaiful, and they were one of the stronger defences in the league last year. Zaiful picking up the Golden Gloves with the clean sheets. The number of clean sheets that he picked up, I think, was 9 come the end of the campaign. And this time around, it hasn't quite been at that point just yet, but remember, even last season it took them quite a bit of time defensively to get going and to get that structure sort of in place. You mentioned Amirul Adli coming in, that also means there's been a bit of a reshuffle defensively at Galang. But overall, I think they're a pretty decent side. You know, I don't expect them to be challenging for the title, but they can sort of turn it on when they need to. And I get the feeling that these are the kinds of games against the top teams that they actually relish playing. I know Galang have lost to the Lion City Sailors already this season, but when you think back to that game and actually watch it, Galang were, I thought at times, a little bit unfortunate. They had a bit more possession. They dominated Lion City Sailors, they created chances, they just couldn't find the back of the net. And then the Sailors, with the individual quality that they have in those counter-attacking moments, are able to do a lot of damage. And I think that could be a similar sort of story here. Although having said that, the Sailors have had a bit more time now with Bernie Abini in the side. Maybe he gets a start up front, and that will be interesting to see how it goes with him leading the line instead of maybe Razak, for example, who's away. So with Bernie Abini coming in, that could give them a bit more of that quality and experience up front to make a big difference in this match against Galang.
We talked about the last game, Galang. Obviously, you said they enjoyed more possession. They had the chances, but do you think it's a certain level of naivety when they have the ball, and give it up that easily, or maybe in parts of the pitch that they don't want to lose the ball?
I think the thing about Galang, and it's also an issue that Hougang have, is they don't necessarily have a player up front who is that sort of traditional number 9 at centre forward, that focal point, hold up play. Yeah. You know, they play with a false 9 at times. You know, Norfal is that player up front for them. Yamaya has been contributing with goals off the flank, and he's obviously a key player for them. Bezakor as well, buzzing around and trying to create chances and opportunities. But yeah, I feel like they do lack a presence up front. The reason why I say this is, of course, you can play without a number 9. Of course you can. It's just how effective the rest of your team is and how good you are at creating chances. But I feel that in leagues like the SPL, you do a lot better when you've got a physical presence up front, when you've got a player up front who can almost create chances on his own. And I feel the league is such that it's a kind of league that's still developing, along with some other countries in Southeast Asia as well. So if you have a player like a Kopitovic, for example, or a Zuzul, we saw how well Zuzul did in the league, you know, that ability to create chances on his own pretty much. And that's where they are sort of lacking a little bit. But again, they do have attacking players who can contribute in terms of the goal scoring front. I think it's going to be a challenge, but it's one that they'll really be up for against this Lion City Sailors side.
Well, Lion City Sailors, they've been great at home, but they struggled away. And is it down to the fact of playing surfaces? Because at Bishan Stadium, they've been unbeaten this season.
Yeah, that's right. Having said that, I think it's 2 of those two of those defeats away from home came against Albrechts and Tampines Rovers, which are going to be tough games. Albrechts, we know they were playing most of it with just 10 players, and then 4-3 against Tampines, which was quite close, quite tight. You could say that. I mean, it's Singapore football. It's a small country, and you'd like to think away form shouldn't really come into it, right? It's not like you're going away 200 kilometers by bus or by train, and then having to sort of adjust to a different place. But yeah, that playing surface one is, I think, very interesting. And as you mentioned, they are playing their home games at Bishan Stadium, a natural grass surface, which is a really good surface to play on. And the only time they play an away game there is against Balestier, as a designated away side. So they benefited from that. And yeah, I mean, because they sort of have to, week by week, if they're playing away from home, just get adjusted to the fact that they're training on grass probably, or mostly used to playing on grass, and then having to come over and adjust to an artificial surface. And that can prove challenging for them. Remember, they dropped points against Young Lions as well at Jalan Besar. So it could be tricky for this Man City Sailor side.
Well, let's shift our attention to the other three games. But before that, let's look at the return fixtures, or rather the fixtures that were played earlier. So Balestier Khalsa, they lost to Tampines 3-1 back in March at the Bishan Stadium. Brunei DPMM, they managed to edge Tanjong Pagar 2-1 at the Jalan Besar Stadium. And Albrechts Niigata ran out 2-0 winners against Hougang United at home at the Jurong East Stadium. So let's talk about that game. Tampines Rovers up against Balestier Khalsa. Tampines at home this time around. Tampines still unbeaten in the league. But interestingly, they've scored less goals than Balestier Khalsa. Balestier have really adopted a very offensive style of football. One could say similar to the way Tampines might want to play. Is that fair to say? or what do you make of the two team styles?
I think they're both coaches like their sides to go and attack. I think they both like the sides to go and try and dominate. But I think Tampines, having been with Gavin longer, obviously a lot better than that. And overall, I say they like to attack, but overall what Tampines Rovers have is balance within the team and balance in the structure. And that's the key thing here, because if you defend properly, then it gives you the platform to go on and attack properly. And you're scoring the goals, you're keeping them out. That is obviously the recipe for success, and that's why Tampines are doing so well this season. For Balestier Khalsa, they're trying to, yes, at times play a possession-based game, get it forward. It can be very nice to watch. And they have some good combinations, some good patterns in their attacking play. And it's not really an issue for them creating chances and scoring goals. I think that part they're pretty good. But defensively, that's where the issue is for the Tigers. And that goes back to my point about the balance that they lack. Obviously, two sides with very different quality in the squad. But Balestier are still struggling with the defensive aspects of their game, where they're making mistakes, conceding goals on the transition. And that's why it's been difficult for them this season.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how Balestier come up against Tampines. Let's talk about DPMM up against Tanjong Pagar. DPMM, their game has been shifted to the Jalan Besar Stadium because the stadium in Brunei is not ready. Do you think that will have an impact? Because we've heard the head coach talk about this, about traveling to Singapore to play the home games and not really have that home advantage.
Yeah, I mean, it can be disruptive, having to take flights back and forth. They're not based in Singapore. Having to go back and then come back again for games, it can be disruptive. It's not the longest of flights, but it's still travel time, and it's still time for check-in and travel and so on. So yeah, it is a bit of an issue for them, and they've not been able to play at home in front of their own fans. And sure, I think those are fair points to make, and the fact that they've also not been playing football at this sort of level for a while now is also something that needs to be highlighted. So yeah, those are things that affect them and have been an issue for them this season, but it's something they've got to look at themselves, because it's their own home ground that's under renovation. Supposed to be completed by now. I think that was something that was a point that was made, and it's not. So it's something that they've got to look at, and they've got to sort it out themselves. And unfortunately, the way that it is right now is we have to make these accommodations in that sense that they have to play here in Singapore. So that's just the situation for DPMM at the moment.
Talking about Tanjong Pagar, one player that we picked out, Shaki Hamza, he's been having a great season for them, not just defensively, but going forward as well. What does he add to this Tanjong Pagar team?
A lot of quality. And he's sort of that player, along with Rishuto. I need to mention that. I think are a lot better than the team overall, in the sense that than the sides that you sort of expect them to be playing for. But they are with Tanjung Pagar, and I don't mean any disrespect to Tanjung Pagar as a club, but Shakir Hamzah is international level player of international quality, and he brings that to this Tanjung Pagar side. His ability to try and organize that defense individually, you know you're going to get a solid game from him. You know, as an individual defender, he's not rarely going to make any errors in the match, and he's got the ability to guide players along, but also stepping forward, contributing on the goal trail. He's someone who played at left back, left wing back, so he's very familiar with getting himself into attacking positions anyway. But yeah, he's been such a big signing for Tanjung Pagar United, and a key player. He's going to be in this match against Brunei DPMM. I expect a physical battle between these two sides in this one.
Well, our final game to talk about, Hougang United up against Albrechts Negata. The big talking point here, Marko Kraljevic back in the dugout, your former coach.
Yeah.
What can we expect from this Hougang side under Marko?
Yeah, one of my former coaches, Marko Kraljevic, and he's a very good guy, nice coach to play for. He knows how to sort of interact with players, and of course when he needs to scream at you, he will. I've had that happen to me before, but otherwise he's really nice to sort of play for. And I think for me, he will sort of try and go back to basics a little bit here with Hougang. Make sure that it's not too complicated. I've said this previously. I think he needs to just get that defensive structure in place and play counter-attacking football. I mentioned earlier Galang lacking a physical centre forward who can get the goals. I think it's the same issue for Hougang. I don't think they really made the smartest of signings in Ferreira coming in, and they don't have that focal point. Hazwan, yes, he's been scoring goals, but he's more effective playing off a striker, I would think, and playing off the wing and drifting into those goal-scoring positions. So yeah, those are some of the things that he's got to sort of deal with up until maybe a transfer window where he can change it. But he knows what it's like to coach in this league. He knows what it's like to come up against strong sides. He doesn't have a very good record.
Yeah, not a great record against Yoshinaga.
Against Yoshinaga, hasn't beaten Yoshinaga. He's only won 3 times against Albrechts Negata in his career, and those 3 times all with Balestier Khalsa. The last one, I think, coming back in the 2015 league campaign. So it's been a while. But I think he knows how to set them up to try and frustrate. And he does have quality in his squad. I would say that this Hougang squad has a lot more quality than his Balestier squads of previous years, for example. So it's a matter of him now trying to use that to stifle and frustrate Albrechts Negata.
So that will definitely be an interesting game to watch, and so will this Galang International up against the Lion City Sailors. That is our feature game of the week. Join Colette Wong and Shasi Kumar as they bring you the team news and analysis ahead of kickoff. Coverage begins from 5:30 p.m. So that brings us to the end of another episode of SPL Express. Lots of football coming your way this weekend, so keep it locked to our SPL YouTube page. We'll see you next week.